We're now going to be moving on to our final session of the day, and I am very pleased to introduce Sophie Bulcraig, who is the Director for Development EMEA at OpenX. So Sophie will lead the conversation as we look to tie everything that we've discussed today and debate about how we can advance and achieve sustainability in digital advertising. So Sophie, I think, is just connecting, but thankfully I can see her wonderful panel. We've got Adrian, we've got Julie, we have Anne and Stephanie. So we will just wait for our host to arrive.
Hello there, can you hear me? Here we go.
We can, perfect. All right, Sophie, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. Hello everybody. I'm delighted to be here, joined by some thought leaders in the sustainability space within our industry. We're quite short on time, so I think we'll pretty much jump right into it. I'm Sophie, I head up our EMEA biodevelopment team at OpenX. We've undergone a corporate carbon audit as a business and signed up to the Science Based Target Initiative Net Zero Pledge. And we were independently verified by the auditors RSK as having met those net zero targets back in December last year, having reduced our entire business's emissions by over 96%. So it's been really interesting hearing some of the thought leadership going on today, but let's just jump right in here. And as we go along, perhaps if you could introduce yourselves. But yeah, just briefly, delighted to be joined by Anne from Scope 3, Adrian from Microsoft, Julie from Magnite, and Stephanie from Meta. Hi everyone, thanks so much for your time today. We've seen a lot of interesting discussions around local market initiatives and great work being done by some of the companies within our industry around sustainability. Adrian, what really stood out for you? What stood out for you so far?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm delighted to see everyone. Hi, Adrian Cutler. I look after the agency relationship of Dentsu in Microsoft Advertising and pretty passionate about sustainability. Our two companies have worked together for some time on this. So for me, I think the first thing that stood out is the fact that the IAB Europe team formed the Sustainability Committee. Kudos to the IAB for doing that. Really, we do need standards and a standard framework for the industry to be able to work against. Otherwise, the way I liken it is, I imagine that we've just had power for the first time and everybody wants to connect to it. Very quickly, you'd have thousands of different plugs and sockets that you'd want to try and connect to, and there would be nothing that's consistent. Very hard for anybody to understand what is the sort of standard that they could work and where they'd have impact. Actually, it sounds a little bit like the launch of our mobile phone industry that we have now today. But the reality is that you need that framework in place. So kudos to the IAB for doing that. And then a thumbs up to Patagonia, the worn wear, really thinking about their supply chain and the full impact that they can have, that it's not just to wear it once and discard, making it cool to have secondhand clothing. I think that's really good. And then it would be remiss of me not to mention Microsoft. We created a climate innovation fund, a $1 billion fund to fuel the innovation needed to remove the carbon that's been put into the environment across our full supply chain since 1975. 1975 is a good year. It's the same year that I was born. And for me to effectively audit my life would be a massive undertaking, thinking about the carbon impact I've had. We've invested in 25 investments so far to date, one a month ago, but there's still a lot of work to do, as you can imagine.
Great, thanks, Adrian. In your opinion, then, what role do you think different companies can play in order to tackle sustainability and meet those commitments within the digital advertising supply chain? Anne, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, and hi everyone. So I'm Anne. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Scope 3. We talk about supply chain emissions on a daily basis. We're here to help this conversation and to decarbonize media and advertising overall. So this is I guess a 24/7 question that I'm trying to answer. I think for me, what's really different about this challenge that we have as an industry is that it goes beyond our own reporting, and it rolls up not just to what governments and what's being asked of us there, but also to the world, right? We can measure the amount of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. So we know that there's this difference in what globally is being reported and what we can actually truly measure in the atmosphere, and there's a 40% difference. So I think what companies really need to start doing, recognizing this problem, is firstly, looking at themselves and looking at thinking about their own measurement, but recognizing that this is a really complex, interconnected system, and the emissions of one company is in the supply chain of all of the partners that they work with and all of their partners. And so I think that the kind of one first thing to say there is that recognizing that and realizing that you can't just get your own house in order, you have to be thinking about that you work with too is really important.
Yeah, completely agree. We're just a part of the entire overall supply chain. And at that same point, we're not pertaining to be experts in this. As an ad tech industry, we are fairly new to climate change. So yeah, that external verification and leaning on experts in this space, I think, is crucial. Stephanie, Julie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure, I can weigh in. So yeah, I definitely think that first and foremost, you do have to get your house in order and look after that. I know for Meta, we are very proud that in 2020, we achieved net zero for our scopes 1 and 2, but in often cases, as is with Meta and many of our advertising clients, for instance, the larger scope is in scope 3. It's in your entire value chain. And that's where we've committed to net zero by 2030 in our entire value chain. So I think it is about looking at the whole ecosystem there. It's also about these collaborations, because one company can't do this alone. So getting your own house in order, thinking about the entire supply chains and evaluating that. But then we really need to think about how can we come together as an industry. And I guess one that I would add on as far as something that I think stands out and we're proud members of is AdNet Zero, which is a global initiative to really combat climate change and kind of the industry's response to climate action. And I think what's really good about this is that it's global in its nature, and it's bringing together not only forms like Meta or Google, et cetera, but it's bringing together large and small agencies, advertisers, and then critically trade bodies as well, that are doing some of the deepest levels of collaboration that I've seen in the industry. So I think that for us, that's a really important piece as well, is just getting out there and being advocates as well as deeply engaged in these industry initiatives to help us make a greater impact and accelerate that impact together.
I agree. AdNet Zero not been running for a long time, but have made a massive impact in the industry. Their measure, reduce and remove ethos is something that we've all seemed to have taken on board. So yeah, it's really exciting to see what an impact they're making in the space. In terms of barriers that we need to address in order to successfully reduce carbon emissions, are there any things that spring to mind? Julie, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Julie Selman, and I head up the EMEA business at Magnite. I'm also the sustainability lead at Magnite. Yeah, I think we've heard a lot today about the opportunities and barriers, measurement, standardization, awareness, collaboration, education, all these topics. But I think one of the things that Annalena was saying earlier in the sort of IAB panel was the mindset and the fear and the paralysis. And I've seen that kind of both in partners around us and just speaking to people on a daily basis, or people as we are, the fear to make a mistake or the unknown. So I think education is super key. We've mentioned AdNet Zero, IAB Europe, various corporate companies who are ahead of the game. We heard from The Guardian or Impact Plus or Scope 3. I think there's a lot we can do to learn from each other. And I think on a completely different side of things, obviously from a digital ad industry and working in programmatic as we do, a huge barrier is obviously the inefficiencies that we see, especially in the programmatic supply chain. So I know SPO has been like a big thing for the last couple of years, but it was always focused on cost efficiencies or transparency and where is my spend going. But this has now become really a focus with an angle or a lens of sustainability as well, to really understand where am I spending and not working with, I don't know, it was Frankenstack or something that was mentioned earlier, with 40 layers and really focusing there. And I think that's a big barrier, but also an opportunity where we can do much better as an industry.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And we talk at Scope 3 a little bit about green working versus greenwashing. So I think one of the negative impacts of greenwashing from a collaboration perspective is people are afraid to share what they're doing to try and reduce emissions within their tech stack or within their advertising campaigns. The UN Secretary General last week cleverly used the Oscar title, which is why I can remember his quote of saying that we need to do everything everywhere all at once. And I think a little bit of that is deciding what we're going to do and learning from each other. And so I think one of the barriers is this fear of sharing in the spirit of progress, not perfection, because you don't want to be called out ultimately by consumers or by watchdogs. So I think that's one thing that I see as an issue. And then just to add on to and echo Julie's point around like internal education, we're all advertising professionals. We can't do everything everywhere all at once because we need to sleep and we hopefully don't spend 24 hours a day working our jobs. And so in our jobs, if our title's not head of sustainability and we're trying to work out what we can build into our daily lives, there is fear, there's need for education, and there is a need to think, okay, if I'm a trader and I'm trying to optimize, and now I need to also think about carbon, how do I balance all of these levers, and how am I sure that I'm not going to be getting a bad mark against some of my own internal KPIs that I'm trying to set, especially in this kind of job market. And so I think that there's just that education piece there, and recognizing, we saw on one of the previous panels, I can't remember exactly how Marion described the different ways of ambition versus level setting, recognizing there is performance gains to be made from factoring in sustainability. It's not just this thing on the side. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, we are in the business of ensuring strong performance. So we build up relationships that way. But yeah, I think there is an interesting correlation between improving activities within the supply chain, within our daily roles around sustainability, and then that tying in with campaign performance efficiencies. So yeah, I think the two work really well together. Great. So wrapping up, before, I think we've got a couple of audience questions, just to the group, what do you think we can achieve as an industry in the next 12 months as we look to drive the sustainability agenda forward? What can we really do to make a difference, do you think?
Cool. I'd love to kick it off on this one. My goal would be that we change the way brands, agencies and publishers think about the infrastructure and the impact that they're having on carbon. Really a sort of call to arms. There's been some press around green hushing and referenced it earlier. I like the green work narrative. Be bold, be transparent. And also really, sustainability is really a personal journey. And I liken it to the sort of awakening of our industry into inclusion and inclusion in advertising. A couple of years ago, you had CMO of Unilever take to the stage and share how, irrespective of where you are on your journey of inclusion, there's money to be made. And he proved that when you put real people in real adverts, he sold more product. I would say that sustainability is very much likened to that same element of personal journey. But if you're not quite there yet on the personal journey of doing it because it's the right thing to do for the planet and for our ecosystem, there is still opportunity to be able to drive revenue as well. It's not a one or the other.
I think that it's good to look at this 12-month horizon and look at what we can achieve there. But I do think the next 2 to 3 years are so critical for kind of the trajectory of where we're heading as an industry and the impact that we can make to accelerate the transition. So I think in the next 12 months, what I think is an achievable goal is for us to get to a common data and measurement methodology around media carbon emissions. I believe that we're going to get there globally as an industry, aligning on that so that we know what the inputs need to be and we have common outputs coming out of it. I think that for me, thinking about over that next longer 2 to 3 year horizon that we need to make sure we're thinking about is, as a service industry, we need to, just like every other industry out there, we have to transform ourselves. And we need to transform ourselves into an industry that is in service of a net zero economy, a regenerative economy. And I think that if we just focus on kind of the media carbon emissions and the production carbon emissions without thinking of ourselves as that service industry, without thinking about the superpowers we have around creativity, around behavior change, and that outsized opportunity that we have as an ad industry to really drive forward behavior change, help our clients in their sustainability transformations. I think that we've missed it. So I think for me, that next 2 to 3 years, we really need to understand our responsibility in that space, transform ourselves that we're in service, and really driving forward sustainable lifestyles, sustainable consumption.
Completely agree, Steph. Thank you. And I think that definitely that ties back into the initial mindset element. People have got to overcome their fear of sharing where they're at in their journey, because it is all about collaboration, because we are focused on that end goal. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Really interesting questions and, well, interesting feedback to the questions. I've got a question from the audience, so I will read this out now. Would the big tech companies plan to provide data transparency on the allocated carbon emissions to digital ad media clients soon? If yes, what's the aspirational timeline? If not, what is the major barrier?
I can give that one from a meta perspective, if that's helpful, because this is a question that we get asked a lot. And I think this comes back to the risk that we have around and the barrier that we have of right now, all the asks are completely different. So advertisers, agencies, consultancies are all asking us for completely different data sets that are going into different models, different methodologies. So we are advocating that the industry get to a single aligned data framework and measurement methodology. And then we are absolutely wanting to provide that kind of, once we agree on those inputs, provide that data for all advertisers, large and small. That is definitely our aspiration.
I'd pile onto that as well, if I may, that part of being part of the IAB Sustainability Committee is I've got to meet a lot more people across the industry that have been addressing this, which is brilliant. And Anne knows from another conversation we've had, in pretty much every conversation that I've had, everybody mentions Scope 3. Kudos, well done, Scope 3. I think some of the frameworks and the way that you're thinking about the industry is incredible. What can ad tech and our entire industry do, actually? Yes, to build on what Steph's saying, is once we figure out what that common framework is, if it's the same principles that maybe Anne and Scope 3 have produced, or a combination of that and what we found from the industry and what we've done through our state of readiness in the IAB committee, whatever that thing is, once that lands, I feel we can get significant traction and we can get that other 45% of the industry to start taking action today.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time today. I think key takeaways, thanks so much to the IAB for providing this framework. The Sustainability Council it's been illuminating every week. There's so many thought leaders and it's great to see everyone coming together. I think as an industry, I think we are moving in the right direction to reach some kind of standardization, but I really encourage to continue the dialogue and to continue to be curious and ask questions, because it's a fast moving space, isn't it? Thank you.